This conference will now be recorded.
Whenever in future, suppose if you are creating a new service from the server, and if you want to enable any of those ports, you can always go ahead and edit it back. It is not mandatory to it at the point of launch of EC2 instance. So any default instructions అన్ని అప్పుడే allow చేయాలి అనేది రూల్ ఏం కాదు. సో ఏ పాయింట్ ఆఫ్ టైం లో అయినా మీరు ఆ రూల్స్ ని మోడిఫై చేసుకోవచ్చు. సో ద ఓన్లీ థింగ్ ఇస్ యూ హ్యాస్ టు బి ద ఓనర్ ఫ్రమ్ విచ్ దిస్ పర్టికులర్ instance is created or launched. So that's the only condition. So a point of time line, so security kellachu, and you can see the security group relevant to this particular EC2 instance, right? So usually if you want to give a new naming convention also, you can do that, right? So అక్కడ ఆల్రెడీ మనకి క్రియేట్ న్యూ సెక్యూరిటీ గ్రూప్ ఆర్ ఎగ్జిస్టింగ్ అన్నప్పుడు అక్కడ ఆప్షన్స్ ఉంటుంది కదా. సో దేర్ యూ క్యాన్ రీనేమ్ దిస్ సెక్యూరిటీ గ్రూప్ యాజ్ వెల్ ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు. సో ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు కీప్ ఇట్ లైక్ న్యూ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ సెక్యూరిటీ గ్రూప్, అలా కూడా ఈ నేమ్ ని రీనేమ్ చేసుకోవచ్చు while you are going ahead and launching an EC2 instance, right? And here we can see the inbound rules, right? So there are basically two different ways how we can control the traffic, right? So a particular server or ఏదైనా kind of application ki traffic flow అనేది so majorly two different categories లో ఉంటుంది. So one is the inbound traffic and other is the outbound traffic, right? So inbound traffic is nothing but so whatever the outside users are there, so how they can connect to your environment, right? Suppose there is a port called 22, right? So as we have discussed, so 22 port is useful for us to get connected to the Linux environment. So నేను ఒక Linux server కి కనెక్ట్ అవ్వాలంటే నేను ఏదైతే EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాంచ్ చేశానో దానికి ఆ పర్టికులర్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ కి 22 పోర్ట్ అలా ఉండాలి. సో దిస్ ఇస్ ద డిఫాల్ట్ రూల్. ఇఫ్ ఇట్స్ నాట్ అలౌడ్, ఐ విల్ నాట్ బి ఏబుల్ టు కనెక్ట్, right? So then what is this rule majorly inbound rules deals is I'm an external user, right? So for example, I'm trying to connect this server from my local environment, so which is in somewhere in India. It's in not related nowhere to this region, right? So Ohio is somewhere else and I am located somewhere else, right? So both are completely different from each other. ఆ లొకేషన్ లో క్రియేట్ చేసిన ఇన్స్టెన్స్ ని నేను నా ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ నుంచి యాక్సెస్ చేయాలి అంటే, సో దేర్ హ్యాస్ టు బి సమ్ రూల్స్ విచ్ సేయింగ్ దట్ ద పర్మిషన్ ఈస్ అలౌడ్ ఫర్ మీ, right? So outside user ki permission unda leda, nenu server loki enter avgalutana leda, right? So whether I have right to enter into the server or not, right? So that is decided by inbound rules, any service. Otherwise, let's say an example called any other database, right? Okay, database service undi like MySQL or SQL, whatever you might have heard, right? So nenu aa service ni install chesanu. So what I want to do is I don't want to give access to all the users, right? Like anywhere ala నాకు ఇవ్వాలని లేదు. So I want to give a fixed range of IP address, right? So నేను ఆ fixed range of IP address ఇచ్చాను, దాని మీనింగ్ ఏంటి ఇన్బౌండ్ రూల్స్ లో అంటే ఓన్లీ ఆ రేంజ్ నుంచి ఎవరైతే కనెక్ట్ అవ్వడానికి ట్రై చేస్తారో వాళ్ళకి మాత్రమే యాక్సెస్ వస్తుంది. సో మిగతా యూజర్స్ ఎవరు నా ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ లోకి ఎంటర్ అవ్వలేరు, right? So that is what the inbound rules about. Inbound traffic or inbound rules are nothing but the rules which decide who has to go ahead and basically access your services from outside, right? So మీ పర్టికులర్ సర్వీస్ ని అవుట్ సైడ్ ఆఫ్ ఓహయో రీజన్ నుంచి ఎవరు యాక్సెస్ చేయగలుగుతారు, ఆర్ విత్ ఇన్ ఓహియో ఆల్సో యూ క్యాన్ లిమిట్, బికాస్ కస్టమ్ అనే ఆప్షన్ ఉంది కదా, మీరు స్పెసిఫిక్ గా ఒక ఐపీ అడ్రస్ రేంజ్ ఇవ్వచ్చు, రైట్? సో ఆ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ ని ఎవరు యాక్సెస్ చేయగలుగుతారు అనేది డిసైడ్ చేసేది ఈ సర్వీస్ 22 పోర్ట్. అలానే మనం SQL కి వెళ్తే దానికి డిఫరెంట్ పోర్ట్ ఉంటుంది. లేదు అంటే ఇఫ్ యూఆర్ హ్యావింగ్ ఆర్ గోయింగ్ ఫర్ ఎనీ అదర్ HTTP లాంటి ఒక సర్వీస్ కి వెళ్ళాం అనుకోండి, దాని యూనిక్ పోర్ట్ దానికి ఉంటుంది, రైట్? సో ప్రతి పోర్ట్ కి రూల్స్ అనేది యూనిక్ గా ఉండాలి, రైట్? అండ్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైమ్ యూ క్యాన్ కంట్రోల్ ద ట్రాఫిక్. It is not mandatory అన్ని పోర్ట్స్ కి అందరికి అలౌ చేయాలనేది రూల్ ఏం కాదు. సో డిపెండింగ్ ఆన్ యువర్ నీడ్ అండ్ హౌ యూ కెన్ ఎన్షూర్ ద సెక్యూరిటీ, రైట్? సో ద వెరీ ఫస్ట్ place where you will limit the security in your environment is through security groups, right? So EC2 instances ki the very first point of security rules, right, which you are handling is majorly from the security group. Security group decide chestadi evaru మీ సర్వీసెస్ ని యాక్సెస్ చేయగలుగుతారు అని. సో డిపెండింగ్ ఆన్ యువర్ నీడ్, limit the access. Always it is suggested like database critical ports or any other server related ports which are critical, you should always make sure you are limiting the access to the external users, right? So by default, whenever you are creating the security group rules, right, by default you will be working only on the inbound rules. security groups మీరు ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాంచ్ చేసేటప్పుడు చూస్తాం కదా, బై డిఫాల్ట్ ద రూల్స్ విచ్ విల్ బి we will update there are inbound rules, right? So majorly inbound rules are important. Outbound rules ఏంటి అంటే మీ పర్టికులర్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ నుంచి బయట మీరు ఎలాంటి పోర్ట్స్ కి కనెక్ట్ అవ్వగలుగుతారు, ఏ సర్వీసెస్ కి కనెక్ట్ అవ్వగలుగుతారు అని. సో దట్ ఈస్ నాట్ మచ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ ఫర్ us and you will not much interact with the outside world to go ahead and get any data. So in case need ఉన్నప్పుడు మనం ఇంటర్నెట్ ఎనేబుల్ చేసుకుంటాం and then we can get the data, right? So outbound rules గ్లోబల్ గా అలౌ చేయడం వల్ల ఎలాంటి ప్రాబ్లం ఉండదు, సిస్టమ్ కి సెక్యూరిటీ వైజ్ ఎలాంటి కాంప్రమైజ్ మాత్రం ఎలాంటి ఇష్యూస్ మాత్రం ఏం రావు, రైట్? సో బై డిఫాల్ట్ దిస్ ఈస్ ద రూల్, ఆల్ టు ఆల్ అంటే మనం బయట ఉన్న ఏ పోర్ట్స్ కైనా మనం ఎక్స్టర్నల్ సర్వీసెస్ కి కనెక్ట్ అవ్వగలుగుతాం. సో బేసికల్ గా ఏంటి అంటే సో ద పబ్లిక్ సెక్యూరిటీ గ్రూప్ ఆర్ ద ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్ విచ్ ఆర్ హ్యావింగ్ అండర్ ద పబ్లిక్ ఐపీ అడ్రస్, రైట్? సో హియర్ బై డిఫాల్ట్ దే విల్ హ్యావ్ ద ఇంటర్నెట్ యాక్సెస్, రైట్? సో బయట నుంచి మీరు ఏదైనా డేటా డౌన్లోడ్ చేసుకోవాలి అన్నా సో ఈ పర్టికులర్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ త్రూ మీరు కనెక్ట్ అవ్వగలుగుతారు, అదేం ప్రాబ్లం కాదు. అండ్ అవుట్ బౌండ్ రూల్స్ వల్ల మీకు ఏం సెక్యూరిటీ కాంప్రమైజ్ ఇక్కడ అయ్యే ఛాన్స్ ఏం లేదు. సో మేజర్ గా మనం కాన్సన్ట్రేట్ చేయాల్సింది ఇన్బౌండ్ రూల్స్ అన్నమాట, right? So which is very important whenever you are working with the security constraint గురించి మాట్లాడేటప్పుడు సో మనకి ఇంపార్టెంట్ థింగ్ ఏంటి అంటే ద ఇన్బౌండ్ రూల్స్. సో who can access your environment, right? So please remember this terminology. You will also hear this under again the networking concepts whenever we discuss, right? So there also you will hear again this particular terminology which is inbound and outbound rules, right? So very important. So again we are trying to identify every particular device over the internet, so with the help of IP address only, right? So here whatever the environment that you are connecting with, right? So it should have public IP, then only I'll be able to connect through internet. So that is what which you will see under the description tab. So if my environment is not having the public IP address, I cannot connect to the instance directly from the internet through నేను direct గా instance కి connect అవ్వలేను if there is no public IP address for me, right? And I can see all the information relevant from my environment from here, right? So whatever the default VPC or default cloud environment that AWS is providing me, so under that, right? So later point of time we will see how we can create our own VPC, that we will see later point of time. So for now we are just going with the default VPC that is given by the environment, and you can get all the information like the machine image that we have used and what is the type of operating system. And here we can also see when this particular instance has been launched, and we can also basically go ahead and get the information, all of your relevant information to the environment under this detailed section. So whatever you want to see like the storage details or the networking information or what are the security groups and all, right? Everything you can see from this section. And if you want to any update any kind of rules, just click on it. So this will redirect you to the security groups tab and go down to the edit option, and then you can edit whatever the rules that you want, right? And here another important thing is, so this is considered as an first level of security for any kind of EC2 instances or to your environment, right? So later point of time, so we'll be dealing with more levels of additional security, but for now we can consider this particular environment as in the first layer of security, right? So very important. So EC2 instance security, first we'll talk about this particular case of security group, so which will limit or which will basically acts as an firewall, you can say. So you can consider it as a kind of firewall, so which will limit the access for the outside users ever మీ environment లోకి enter అవ్వగలుగుతారు అని decide చేసేది security groups, right? So which you should always be cautious whenever you are allowing the access, majorly for any kind of database critical services కి చాలా important. So inbound rules అనేది చాలా important whenever you are trying to work with your environment, right? So this is the major security rules which you have to concentrate on, right? And apart from that, yesterday someone were asking about the environment with respect to public IP address and all, right? So whenever you are working with the EC2 instances, so by default, as I said, you will have the public IP address, and I'll be able to connect through this particular public IP address. Here this particular public IPv4 address whatever you are seeing, right? So this is not static, right? So static in the sense whenever you are trying to go ahead and restart or reboot your EC2 instance, this will keep on changing, right? So this particular IP address, whatever you are seeing here, right? So this is not fixed. It means whenever you are trying to go ahead and restart a particular EC2 instance, this IP address keeps on changing, which means so whenever you are trying to work with any kind of testing environments, that is fine. So for example, now we are using this particular thing for our learning purpose. So learning purpose అన్నప్పుడు problem ఏం లేదు. But whenever you see the same thing with the real time application, so that's definitely an issue. ఎందుకంటే రోజుకు ఒక IP అడ్రస్ దానికి అలికేట్ అవుతూ ఉంటే, సో మనం ప్రతిసారి అప్లికేషన్ సెట్టింగ్స్ లో వెళ్ళి IP అడ్రస్ ని మాడిఫై చేస్తూ ఉండలేం, right? So that is really difficult to handle. So in that case, so we'll be having an additional flexibility which can make this IP address as a static, right? So for now, let's try to see to go ahead and restart the EC2 instance and see the change, right? So we'll see the change, whether this IP address is getting modified or not. So how exactly it is working, then how I need to make it an static IP address, right? So let's go to the instance state. So what I want to do is I want to either stop and start, or I want to reboot this particular instance. Anything you can do. Reboot reboot also will do stop and start of the EC2 instance, or so this particular environment will also help us to go ahead and give an quick restart of your environment, right? So you can do it either ways. So ilana cheyandi ledante instance state, let me select. You can stop and start the instance also, right? So you can stop, and suppose like if you are seeing, so mere practice wise consider చేశారు అనుకోండి, usually stop చేసి start చేస్తారు కదా. So which we are trying to go ahead and stop, right? So let me refresh it. So once this is completely stopped, then I'll try to again start it back. So ఇలా stop చేస్తే background లో process అని neat గా మొత్తం clear అవుతాయి, and then it will again freshly start up the EC2 instance, right? And here now my instance is in stop state, right? And new instance ni click cheyandi, and then again I want to start the instance back, right? So now I can see there is no public IP address that is allocated. So ఇప్పుడు నేను మళ్ళీ స్టార్ట్అప్ చేసినప్పుడు ఇంకొక IP address నాకు రావాలి, right? So new IP address has to be allocated to my environment, so which I can see from here also, at the same time from the detail section also, right? So it is in pending state, which you can see here, and then wait, refresh for it and wait for it to come up. Right? So now we can see. So if you see, you might have understood the range itself is completely different. Now we can see in the some different IP address range lo vachindi kada, ippudu chudandi different IP address range lo vastadi, right? So what you should have observed is, whenever I have stopped the instance, the public IPv4 address whatever I'm having here is showing as a blank, right? So it means it is waiting for the instance to come up. So ఎప్పుడైతే next time instance ని మనం turn on చేస్తామో, అప్పుడు అది automatic గా ఏం చేస్తుంది, it's trying to pick up some free IP address, and then it is reflecting the same from the console, right? So it means whenever you are working with this public IPv4 address, so this is not constant, or this is not static, right? So static you generally say, right? So its nature is in dynamic, right? So dynamic nature through work అయింది అనుకోండి. So for learning purpose, that is not a problem. So because that's not a big deal for us. Suppose if I have stopped today, రేపు మళ్ళీ స్టార్ట్ చేశాను, సో కొత్త IP అడ్రస్ కాపీ చేసుకుంటాను, అండ్ దెన్ ఐ ట్రై టు లాగిన్ టు ద సర్వర్. సో డేటా ఇంపాక్ట్ అవ్వనంత వరకు నాకేం కాదు. కాకపోతే దీన్ని మనం రియల్ టైమ్ వరల్డ్ లో అప్లికేషన్ క్రియేషన్స్ లో యూజ్ చేస్తున్నాము అనుకోండి, సో దిస్ IP అడ్రస్ ఇలా ఫ్లక్చుయేట్ అవుతూ ఉంటే, సో దట్ ఈస్ రియలీ హార్డ్ టు అండర్స్టాండ్ ఆర్ హార్డ్ టు డూ ద కాన్ఫిగరేషన్ ఎవ్రీ సింగిల్ టైమ్. సో దట్ ఈస్ ద రీజన్ వాట్ we will try to do is, we will alternatively try to come up with an option called elastic IP address, right? So elastic IP address is nothing but a fixed or a static IP address, so which you generally go ahead and allocate to your EC2 instances, right? So you can see this option from your environment under the network and security. So network and security tab కింద elastic IPs అనే ఆప్షన్ ఉంటుంది. So just click on this elastic IPs, right? Here you can see a particular option called allocate elastic IP address. So just click on it, and then what this thing will basically do is, it will try to pick up a particular IP address, so which is free, and then you can allocate to your EC2 instance, and which is static. So even though you try to restart the EC2 instance multiple times, ఈ IP address ని యూజ్ చేసుకుంటే మనకి ఆ ప్రాబ్లం అనేది ఉండదు అన్నమాట. So this will keep the environment static, right? So IP address would be more static if you are trying to go ahead and use it. And here we are not doing anything. So Amazon free IP address nunchi the system would pick up any particular IP address, and then it will try to go ahead and allocate, right? So allocate cheyali, and at the same time once allocated you have to attach this to your instance. Manual ga maname attach cheyali. So just select the instance, and from the actions you can see, and ikkada meer create chesinappudu kuda immediate ga oka pop up vastadi annamata, associate this elastic IP address అని. ఇక్కడ ఒకటి మనం గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాల్సింది ఏంటి అంటే ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్ తో ఇన్ కేస్ ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్ వెళ్ళి ఏదైనా సర్వర్ తో మీరు అసోసియేట్ చేశారనుకోండి, అటాచ్ చేశారనుకోండి, బిల్లింగ్ అనేది ఏమి జనరేట్ అవ్వదు. సో ఇన్ కేస్ ఇఫ్ ద ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్ ఈస్ ఫ్రీ, ద బిల్లింగ్ వుడ్ బి దేర్. అది ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్ తో మనం గుర్తుపెట్టుకోవాల్సింది. బై డిఫాల్ట్ నేచర్ ఏంటి అంటే, సో వెన్ ఎవర్ యు ఆర్ ట్రైంగ్ టు గో హెడ్ అండ్ వర్క్ విత్ ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్, so if you need for any EC2 instance, use it. So for example, నేను టెంపరరీగా యూజ్ చేయాలి అనుకుంటున్నాను అని మీరు డిసైడ్ అయ్యారు. సో మీరు అలొకేట్ చేశారు, అయిపోయింది. సో కొన్ని డేస్ తర్వాత మళ్ళీ సో దట్ ఈస్ నాట్ ఏ నీడ్, అంటే మీకు మ్యాండేటరీగా అవసరం లేదని చెప్పేసి రిమూవ్ చేద్దాం అనుకున్నారు. సో ఇక్కడ టూ డిఫరెంట్ పారామీటర్స్ ఇన్వాల్వ్ అయి ఉంటాయి. ఒకటి రిలీజింగ్ ద ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్, అండ్ ద సెకండ్ ఈస్ డిసోసియేటింగ్ ద IP అడ్రస్. ఇట్ మీన్స్ యూ హ్యావ్ టు రిమూవ్ ద అటాచ్మెంట్ ఫ్రమ్ ద EC2 instance, and as well as delete that particular elastic IP address from the network and security section, right? So which is very important. So if you are leaving the elastic IP address just like that, so system will cause an additional billing in the environment. So that is the problem with elastic IP. So problem ante, so just you have to ensure there is nothing problem from the elastic IP and so me and nunchi meer idi pratisari careful ga handle chesukovali. Suppose now we are practicing it, right? So we are doing it, and so what I have done is I have created new IP address, and then finally I am associating or I am attaching to an EC2 instance. So repe emaindante, so once my practice is done, I have terminated that server, right? అప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది, ఆటోమేటిక్ గా దాని నుంచి ఎలాస్టిక్ IP అడ్రస్ అనేది రిలీజ్ అయిపోతుంది. సో అప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది అంటే ఫ్రీగా ఇక్కడ ఉండిపోతుంది IP అడ్రస్. సో ఇట్ డోంట్ నో వేర్ ఇట్ హ్యాస్ టు గో, ఇట్ విల్ జస్ట్ బి అవైలబుల్ ఇన్ ద పోర్టల్. So then that might be causing a billing on your environment, right? So nowhere related to free tier. So free tier ki daniki sambandham em ledu. So this will cause the generate the billing in the environment. So andukani eppudaina best practice enti ante elastic IP address association chesin tarvata so this particular environment will basically use it. So elastic IP associated to multiple instance. So can you tell me why is IP address should be unique, or how exactly the elastic IP address will work, or any kind of IP address will work? Can I use same IP address for two different instances?
No.
So why I cannot do that?
Unique for every.
Yeah, unique for every module.
Right? So whatever the environments that we are having, to any environment, you can basically have it unique. You cannot basically go ahead and use the same IP address for the different EC2 instances. So as I said, elastic IP address also is much similar like an IP address. It is not much complicated, or it is not something different from this environment, right? And here this particular IP address, whatever you are using as an elastic IP, right? So we want to go ahead and use to the different servers. So then it is basically not directly for the instance level, which we can do. We can associate at a different level of load balancer, but not to the instances. For example, if you have disassociated or if you have released the IP address, right? So then you can associate it. But as an main or as a main public IP address, you will not be able to go ahead and use at a time for the two different EC2 instances, right? So here that is not needed, and I don't think that will be much useful for you to go ahead and use it, right? So you cannot need it, and you don't need to do it, because the major reason is I want to associate or I want to make it unique. సో అదే మీరు రిలీజ్ చేశారనుకోండి, సపోజ్ ఇప్పుడు నాకు అసోసియేట్ లేదు కదా, సో ఇప్పుడు నేను దీన్ని తీసుకెళ్ళి దేనితోనే అసోసియేట్ చేయగలుగుతాను. వన్స్ అసోసియేటెడ్, వాట్ హ్యాపెండ్ ఇస్, నేను దేనికైతే అసోసియేట్ చేశానో ఆ సర్వర్ ని టర్మినేట్ చేశాను, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, రైట్? ఇఫ్ ఐ హ్యావ్ టర్మినేటెడ్ దట్ పర్టికులర్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్, సో దెన్ దిస్ ఈస్ ఫ్రీ. అప్పుడు ఇది ఫ్రీగానే ఉంటుంది. అప్పుడు మీకు దీన్ని ఏ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ కి కావాలంటే ఆ పర్టికులర్ EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ కి అటాచ్ చేయొచ్చు. బట్ సర్వర్ లెవెల్ మాత్రం at a time we can basically go ahead and use for one single EC2 instance. But if you're trying to work with any kind of load balancing environment and all, where the traffic distribution is different, So the traffic distribution there works based on the load balancing technique that you are using. So there you can basically come up and use it. But for the EC2 instances, so it is that you can have one IP address for an environment, right? So that is what you have to remember. And once you release, so మళ్ళీ నేను చెప్తున్నాను, in case మీరు associate చేయకుండా రిలీజ్ చేసేసి ఉంటే మాత్రం, సో రిలీజ్ స్టేటస్ లో ఉన్న IP అడ్రస్ ని అటాచ్ చేసుకోవచ్చు, ఎందుకంటే అది మళ్ళీ ఫ్రెష్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాగా కన్సిడర్ చేస్తుంది కాబట్టి. So if you click on associate, and then here you can see instance and network interface, right? So I want to basically go ahead and attach to my instance, and then click on associate. Right, and then from here only you can see this particular option, and at the same time IP address undi kada, so try to open EC2 instance in a different tab. Right, so that is the reason like why we are basically using this tag name and all, right? So it will be easy for us to understand the things, right? So 3.23 and 71.38 and 71.38. So this is how you will be basically trying to go ahead and work with the association of IP addresses in your environment, right? So in this way you will try to go ahead and associate, and even though if you are trying to go ahead and restart the instance, sorry.
I have it.
Yes.
So why are we going with this associated IP address? Because we already have this private IP as a permanent IP, and which is like static forever, right? So why are we?
Yes. Is it a public IP address? Like if I want to connect to the internet? Okay, saying okay, you're having a private IP address, right? So if I have a requirement to go ahead and connect this particular IP address through internet, can I connect with the help of a private IP? So if you just understand, I'm just talking this as a replacement to our public IP, not a replacement for the private IP address. I'm not doing anything, or I'm not touching anything with relevant to the private IP address which is already allocated to the environment, and that will not be changed anywhere. And if you are trying to go ahead and connect through internet, so it is not possible to go ahead and connect through internet with the help of private IP address. Suppose if I want to expose my application over the public IP address, or if I want to do some kind of testing or the validations, so I will try to use public IP only. So even though when VPC comes into picture, so that's a secondary case, but for now if you want to go ahead and connect any kind of your application, if I want to test my application, so it is only through public IP address which we will be doing. So because you can't always go ahead and directly purchase a domain and directly do the testing, so that is nowhere, no one will approach that particular way. So initially they will create a sample applications, try to verify through an IP address that is associated, and then work with the environment. And if you are trying to go ahead and use this as your web server or something, I cannot use it. So private IP address I cannot connect through internet, so you can try that. So private IP address is not having that flexibility to go ahead and have connect directly from the internet through direct connect available. So that is not possible with this. So as I said, I'm not talking about elastic IP as a replacement or an alternative for the private IP address, right? So I am always talking about replacement to the public IP address, where the public IP address is not static. If I want to make it this IP address as a static, I'm taking help of elastic IP. I'm not saying it is a replacement for private IP, and I did not talk anything relevant to the private IP address with public, right? So that is what. So if you are having already an environment, so that's internal communication is completely different. So server to server communication, I'm not talking about that, right? So I'm talking about connecting this instance through internet. So that's why I'm specifically saying public and static IP address, right? So which, if you want to make it a static, then you can basically go ahead and take the help of this particular concept of elastic IP, which will be helpful. So if you're not having EC2 instances under the public instance, so then you don't need it. So I'm not talking it's mandatory to have, right? So as I said, it's a replacement. Whenever you are looking kind of a requirement, where you want to make it your public IP address static, then only you will use the elastic IP. I hope I have repeated the same. I did not say anything relevant or its replacement for private IP address or anything. It's just a replacement for a dynamic public IP address. And if you're having any kind of requirement to keep the public IP address as a static, even though you are restarting, even though you are doing anything with your EC2 instance, then I will take off help of elastic IP, and it is not mandatory. And here everything will comes according to your requirement. So if you want to use it, so as I said, if you need a static public IP, then you will use this service. But if someone gets it out like, okay, it is keep on changing, so nenu ee particular IP address in a real time environment ki how I can use it, I cannot depend on this kind of public IP address anukuntam kada. So then we can basically go ahead and take the help of this elastic IPs in the environment. So majorly, so if you are not having your EC2 instances in public, that's completely fine, right? So it is not mandatory you have to use the elastic IP. But if you are using it and if you are terminating the EC2 instance, just make sure that you release this particular IP address from your environment. Right? So that's the only thing which you have to take care, because unless and until it is associated, there will be no additional billing. But if you are not associating with the any of the EC2 instances, right? So the billing would happen for the elastic IP address. EC2 instance general instructions 750 hours once it is crossed, the billing would be generated. So those rules are common. So those rules will not change. I'm just talking about the what you call the billing for the EC2 instance. So billing for EC2 instance is different, and billing for elastic IP is different. Unless and until it is associated, there will be no additional billings that are associated for your environment, right? And here if I say something, it doesn't mean you have to use requirement, right? So if your requirement is matching that, you will use it, right? So every time it is not mandatory to allow the port or to create a service, right? So all this we are learning by a process. Whenever you have that requirement, what I should do, right? Suppose if I have a requirement something like this, so how I should achieve this, so that is what we would be learning. And I'm not saying all these things will be implemented in your environment, right? So sometimes, as I said, major ga instance creation initial stages lo idi mandatory untundi for any kind of applications you are launching, or if you want to test anything, right? Public IP address mandatory ga undali, endukante private IP address through మీరు బ్రౌజర్ యాక్సెస్ అదంతా వెరిఫై చేయలేరు. జస్ట్ ఇంటర్నల్ కమ్యూనికేషన్ ని మాత్రమే మనం ఆథెంటికేట్ చేసి వెరిఫై చేయగలుగుతాం. And so these two are the major things. So with respect to network and security, security groups and elastic IPs, always remember about inbound rules and outbound rules from here, and what is the nature of this particular elastic IPs. And key pairs are nothing but so these are the one which will help us to connect to our EC2 instances, right? So this is the place from where we have an association to our EC2 instances. And the network interfaces are nothing but from which you are able to connect to the internet, right? So if the network interfaces are not allocated to your environment, I'll not be able to connect to my EC2 instance, right? So simple like a cable or the network connectivity that we have for us, even the servers have those network interfaces, but nowhere we have to go ahead and manually deal with it. So system, whenever you are trying to connect to the environment, right? So all this environment is by default set up in the infrastructure, so which we are not dealing. So the AWS team would be leading. If you're having any problem with the connectivity and all, so they would be ensuring that the network connectivity and all everything is in place, right? And apart from that, with respect to EC2 instances, so we have to know about this AMIs, right? So by default, what we are trying to do is, so whenever we are launching a new instance, so we are basically trying to go ahead and use a default AMIs that are available, right? So under default Amazon machine images evaithe unnayo, so dani manam reference ga teeskuntunnam, right? Any machine image, basically what it will hold is a type of operating system and with the configuration, right? So configuration in the sense your CPU, memory, and the type of kernel which it is carrying out. So in case if we talk about specifically the Linux, so it will hold all this information, and so this is taken as a reference for launching your EC2 instance, right? So here we are not basically trying to go ahead and download anywhere from online, right? So already those things are already in place with cloud. So manam a manual work avoid cheyadaniki cloud ki migrate avutunnam. So everything is available here. So suppose there is a requirement where you want to create your own customized images, Customized images in the sense, suppose I have a requirement something like this. I want to create similar some 20 to 30 instances at a time. Right, so this is a manual work using machine images, but this is one way where we can do it. So ఒక similar kind of ఒక 20 to 30 instances నేను launch చేయాలి. So that's my requirement. So all these 20 instances should have a package called some HTTP, and they should be running with that particular package. And then I want to install some 4 or 5 packages. ఇలా ఒక 4 or 5 software packages ఉన్నాయి. ఈ 20 instances కి ఈ particular requirement నేను క్రియేట్ చేయాలి అనుకుంటున్నాను. సో దిస్ రిక్వైర్మెంట్ క్యాన్ బి అచీవ్డ్ ఇన్ మల్టిపుల్ వేస్. సో వన్ ఆఫ్ ద ఈజియెస్ట్ వేస్ టు హ్యాండిల్ ఈస్ త్రూ మెషిన్ ఇమేజెస్. నేను ఏం చేస్తానంటే ఒక ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాంచ్ చేస్తాను. సో బై టేకింగ్ రెఫరెన్స్ యాజ్ అ రెడ్ హ్యాట్ ఆర్ ఉబంటు వాట్ ఎవర్ ఐ వాంట్ టు యూజ్ యాజ్ అ బేస్ ఆపరేటింగ్ సిస్టమ్, ఐ విల్ యూజ్ దట్ and I will install all these packages. So what I will do, the next step is I'll take this machine image as a reference and create bulk instances at it. Right? So whatever the number of instances I want to launch, I can easily go ahead and launch all those instances. And indirectly what happens is all these instances whatever you are creating, I'm taking reference as this machine image. నేను ఏదైతే క్రియేట్ చేశానో అదే రెఫరెన్స్ గా తీసుకున్నాను కదా. సో all instances will carry all the packages whatever I'm looking up for, right? ఈ 4 or 5 packages ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో అన్ని instances లో download అయిపోయి they are ready for me to use, right? So in such case of automation, if you want to implement, you can take help of machine images. So that is just one of the use cases I'm telling in multiple ways. లేదు అంటే మీరు ఆ మెషిన్ ఇమేజ్ తో ఫ్యూచర్ లో ఇంకెప్పుడైనా EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్ మీకు రిక్వైర్మెంట్ వస్తుంది, I will be using it అన్న, you can basically go ahead and create the customized images, right? So for example, this is my EC2 instance, right? So very easy. So whatever the packages or whatever the dump you want to, you basically try to go ahead and interact through the shell whatever you are having, and then you will install everything related or needed on your environment, right? So once this is done, once your instance is ready with all of your requirements, then it is very simple. We'll go to the actions, images and templates, and then create the image from here, right? So once this particular create image is selected, so towards your left you can see a separate section called AMIs. Images దగ్గర AMIs అనే ఆప్షన్ ఉంటుంది. So whatever you have created the customized machine images, right? So they will be available from here. And from this tab ikkada my AMIs అనే ఆప్షన్ ఉంది కదా. So from here you will be able to see whatever the new AMIs that you have created from your account, right? So they will be visible from here also. మీరు ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాంచ్ చేసేటప్పుడు you can basically go ahead and take this as a reference and then go ahead and launch your EC2 instance, right? So you can do it anyway as per your requirement, but very simple. So whatever is your requirements, సో బేస్ రెఫరెన్స్ గా ఒక మెషిన్ ఇమేజ్ తీసుకోవాలి. అంటే ఏ టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఆపరేటింగ్ సిస్టమ్ మీద మీకు కావాలనుకుంటున్నారో, సపోజ్ లైక్ రెడ్ హ్యాట్ ఆర్ ఉబంటు, వాట్ ఎవర్ ఈస్ యువర్ టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఆపరేటింగ్ సిస్టమ్, select that as a base operating system or the base machine image, and then try to go ahead and create an instance with your requirements, and then launch an EC2 instance, and then log into your server, do whatever the new changes or the new software package installations that you wanted to do. And once the installation everything is done, finally you can verify all the validations from the server level, and then from actions tab you can go ahead and images and templates, and then create the image from here, right? So in this way you can basically go ahead and create the customized machine images in your environment, right? So if you are looking for going ahead and creating the customized images in the environment, so this is the procedure which we'll be doing, right? So the steps are very straightforward. From an EC2 instance, how we can create is that from the image actions only, you will just able to see this create image option, and then you can create it from there. And as I said, all these images that you are creating from your end, right, so will be visible under the images section of AMIs. సో ఇక్కడ ఈ పర్టికులర్ సెక్షన్ కింద మీకు అన్ని AMIs అన్ని ఇక్కడ విజిబుల్ ఉంటాయి అనమాట. సో యూ క్యాన్ సీ ఫ్రమ్ హియర్. అండ్ ఇన్ కేస్ మీకు ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాంచ్ చేసేటప్పుడు చూడాలి అనుకుంటే లాంచ్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ సెక్షన్ లో మై AMIs కింద మనం క్రియేట్ చేసిన డిఫాల్ట్ మెషిన్ ఇమేజెస్ అని ఇక్కడ అవైలబుల్ ఉంటాయి, right? So this is if you are having any kind of customized requirement which you want to create on your environment, right, you can take help of AMIs. ఇంకొక ఫ్లెక్సిబిలిటీ ఏంటి అంటే మెషిన్ ఇమేజెస్ కి you can share with the different region, or you can also come up and share with a different user also, right? మీకు ఇన్ కేస్ ఇప్పుడు ఈ రీజన్ లో ఉంది, ఇంకొక రీజన్ లోకి కాపీ చేయాలి. సో ఇక్కడ ఎలాంటి ఇన్స్టెన్స్ అయితే క్రియేట్ చేశానో అలాంటి ఇన్స్టెన్సే నేను ఇంకొక డిఫరెంట్ రీజన్ లో క్రియేట్ చేయాలనుకుంటున్నాను. సో దట్ ఈస్ పాసిబుల్. అండ్ ఆల్సో ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు షేర్ విత్ ఎనీ అదర్ అకౌంట్, ఈవెన్ దట్ యూ క్యాన్ డూ ఇట్, రైట్? సో దట్ ఈస్ ద flexibility. You can copy from one region to another region, and also you can share the AMI, so which we generally term it as sharing, right? If you want to make it public, which is visible for others, or if you want to share privately to a particular AWS account, that also you can do, right? So that nature is also there with respect to the machine images that we are having, right? So machine images default nature enti ante, so they can have this flexibility to have copied from one region to another region, and also you can share with a different AWS account, whatever you want to, right? You can also share with them, right? So usually you have to give your account number. Usually ila prati account ki oka own ID create avutadi. So if you have this ID, you can basically go ahead and share that particular machine image with those remote environment, right? And this also is according to the requirement, right? So according to the requirement, in the sense, so what kind of customized actions you want to add, right? So depending on that. అండ్ సేమ్ ఇదే యూస్ కేస్ ని డిఫరెంట్ లాగా కూడా యూస్ చేయొచ్చు. ఇంకొక రిక్వైర్మెంట్, నిన్న నేను మీకు యూజర్ డేటా అనేది ఒకటి చెప్పాను కదా, సో అక్కడ నుంచి కూడా ఇన్స్ట్రక్షన్స్ పాస్ చేసి ఒకటేసారి ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లాంచ్ అయ్యేటప్పుడు క్రియేట్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. సో మల్టిపుల్ వేస్ ఉంటాయి. సో వాట్ ఎవర్ ద బెస్ట్ నీడెడ్ ఫర్ అస్ వీ కెన్ డూ. సో మనం అలా చేసినా ఇలా చేసినా జరిగేది బ్యాక్గ్రౌండ్ లో అదే. మీరు అక్కడైనా ఏం చేస్తారంటే, మీరు ఏదైతే లైనెక్స్ కమాండ్స్ ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ చేయాలనుకుంటున్నారో, సో దేర్ యూ విల్ ట్రై టు గో హెడ్ అండ్ give those instructions from there only, right? And here whatever you are creating the machine image, right? So this is completely the same, right? Similar to using the user data through pass చేస్తే ఎలా అయితే వర్కౌట్ అవుతుందో సేమ్ అదే వేలో వర్కౌట్ అవుతుంది. కాకపోతే నేను ఏం చేస్తున్నాను, అక్కడ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లో లాగిన్ అవ్వకుండా అక్కడ నుంచే పాస్ చేసేస్తున్నా కమాండ్స్ అన్ని ఏమైతే ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ చేయాలనుకుంటున్నాను. బట్ హియర్ వాట్ ఐఎమ్ ట్రైంగ్ టు డూ ఇస్ ఐ వాంట్ టు ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఫ్రమ్ ద షెల్. ఇన్ కేస్ ఐ వాంట్ టు యాడ్ సమ్ కస్టమైజ్డ్ యాక్షన్స్ అలా చేయాలి. సో అన్ని అక్కడ పాస్ చేయడం నాకు టఫ్ గా ఉంది. సో ఐ డోంట్ వాంట్ టు గో హెడ్ అండ్ యూస్ ఇట్ దేర్. సో I want to basically come up and do it from command line. You can do it from anywhere, right? So I'm not saying you have to use the same way. As I said, it is just one of the use cases which can be helpful. So if someone asks you like how ila oka requirement undi ante, so through user data you can do it, and at the same time, so with the help of machine images also, you can go ahead and do this kind of actions in the environment, right? So here whatever the new machine images that you are creating in the environment, right? So they will be available under this my AMI section. So whatever you are trying to create in the environment, right? So here we can see that. So for example, create image, right? So you have to give this information. So I'm just giving image name. Done. And here you should just wait for it to be available, right? So you should wait until this particular status is available, right? So here you can see the visibility as private. So for now, because we did not share this particular machine image with anyone else, right? So by default, whoever is the root account from which we have created, he'll be the owner of this account, and the visibility is always private. And then once this particular status is available, then you can work with the different actions from here. So if you are trying to go ahead and use it, you have to wait for it to be status as available, and then you can use it. So from the permissions tab, you can see the same. So already ikkada meeku akkada kanipistundi kada, same ade untadi. So you can see the image is currently private. So here this particular image is not shared with anyone, and it is completely private to this particular AWS account from which I have created. So you have to wait for the status to be available. So then only I'll be able to go ahead and see all this information from here. నాకు ఇక్కడ నుంచి ఆ image ఎప్పుడు కనిపిస్తుంది అంటే, so once this particular status is available, right? So then only I'll be able to see that particular image from there, right? And if you want to, meanwhile, you can take a look on the older image. I'll show you the actions. actions lo chudandi avi kanipistadi. So here you can see the copy machine image is one option, and at the same time you can also see the options to go ahead and modify the image permissions and all, right? So even let me wait. Yeah, now let's see actions, and here you can see copy AMI. If you just click on it, so you can copy from one region to another region, right? So from the source region like Ohio region lo unnam kada, so from this particular region you can basically go ahead and see in your environment. Right, so here you can select the destination region, to which region you want to copy this image, right? You can select that particular destination region, and you will be having the flexibility to go ahead and copy to those regions from there, right? So this is the default nature which is supported. So whatever the region you want to, just select that particular region, and then you can copy AMI. So you can basically go ahead and copy this particular image to another region. Alane inkoka option untundi, so where you will be seeing modify or image permissions, right? So here you can see by default I'll have the permissions. If I want to add permissions, or if you want to give any additional account, you can basically go ahead and add and save it, right? So this can be within the different regions, or also different account numbers that you're having. You can add the permissions from the environment, right? So that is the flexible nature. Alane ikkada nunchi meeku kotta AMI register cheyalanna option untundi. So deregister is nothing but removing the instance or removing this customized image from your environment, right? And here you can see add or edit tags is nothing but simply if you are adding, if you want to recognize this machine image, ikkada naku name ippudu em ledhu kada. So here if you see there is no name here which I'm using, right? But I want to identify, I want to give an identity for that, saying okay, this is the purpose of this image. So then you can create the tag, right? So name you can give, and the value is what you are using this EC2 instance for, right? So dantlo meer edaina application install chesara, edaina database install chesara, aa information ni value lo pass cheyandi, so that it can be useful for future whenever if any others are coming into the environment and seeing, right? So they can understand. ఇప్పుడు ఇది రిమోట్ రీజన్ లకు ఎక్కడైనా కాపీ చేసినప్పుడు సో వాళ్ళకి ఈజీగా ఐడెంటిఫై చేయడానికి హెల్ప్ఫుల్ అవుతుంది అనమాట. సో దట్ ఈస్ అన్ అడ్వాంటేజ్ if you're adding the tags from here, right? And here you can basically go ahead and launch the instance directly from here. When you click on this button also, it will get redirected to the same launch instance tab. Launch instance tab ke redirect avutadi, and you can do it from there, or otherwise, so once you are done with your available status, then you can check from IAMS. So this should show you the default section, right? So, and as I said, always whoever have created this account, he'll be the default owner for this environment, where you can see this. And the default settings you can come up and again change. If you want to increase the resource section like CPU, memory and all, you can go ahead and change, but the reference is same. And the background low data, whatever the functionality you have, right? So that would look the same. You can go and do it. Select, right? So if you want to create a similar server but with higher configuration also, you can do it, because this is always an flexible nature for the environment to change the settings. But if I don't want to make any other modifications, I want to use same kind of storage, same kind of configuration, I can proceed to go ahead and launch the EC2 instance, right? So that is how the machine images will have the functionality, right? And always, as I said, so this is like a customized feature. కొన్నిసార్లు ఏం చేస్తారంటే రెడీగా ఉంచేసుకుంటారు ఇలా మెషిన్ ఇమేజెస్ ని, లైక్ కాన్ఫిగరింగ్ విత్ రెస్పెక్ట్ టు ద డేటాబేస్ కాన్ఫిగరేషన్స్ అంతా రెడీ చేసుకొని ఒక ఇన్స్టెన్స్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తారు. సో ఏంటంటే క్విక్ గా ఎప్పుడైనా ఫ్యూచర్ లో మీకు కావాలి అనుకోండి, సో మళ్ళీ ఆ కాన్ఫిగరేషన్స్ అన్ని అప్డేట్ చేయకుండా జస్ట్ ఆ మెషిన్ ఇమేజ్ ని యూజ్ చేసుకొని క్విక్ గా లాంచ్ చేయొచ్చు, రైట్? సో ఇట్ విల్ నాట్ వేస్ట్ ఎనీ ఆఫ్ యువర్ టైం, రైట్? సో అలాంటి ఒక క్విక్ యాక్షన్స్ కి కానీ అట్లాంటి ఆటోమేషన్ సెక్షన్స్ కి ఏంటి అంటే, సో వీ కెన్ బేసికలీ గో హెడ్ అండ్ టేక్ హెల్ప్ ఆఫ్ మెషిన్ ఇమేజ్, రైట్? సో ఇఫ్ ఐఎమ్ నాట్ క్రియేటింగ్, సో యూ హ్యావ్ టు డూ ఎ మాన్యువల్ టాస్క్, బట్ ఏంటి అంటే బల్క్ ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్ క్రియేట్ చేయొచ్చు. దట్ ఈస్ వన్ ఫ్లెక్సిబుల్ నేచర్. And at the same time you can basically share with them, right? So share other accounts, or if you want to share within your project a different account, so that is also possible from here, right? So for example, as I said yesterday, usually you'll have separate accounts maintained, right? So the testing account and oka separate maintain chestaru, and at the same time you will also have a production account, right? So మీరు ఇలా టెస్ట్ చేసి ఒక డెవలప్మెంట్ అకౌంట్ నుంచి ప్రొడక్షన్ అకౌంట్ కి షేర్ చేయాలనుకోండి, ఈజీగా చేయొచ్చు, రైట్? సో మీరు అక్కడే క్రియేట్ చేయాలనేది మ్యాండేటరీ కాదు. సో మీరు ఎక్కడ క్రియేట్ చేసైనా సో యూ క్యాన్ బేసికలీ గో హెడ్ అండ్ షేర్ ఫ్రమ్ దేర్, రైట్? సో దేర్ యు ఆర్ నాట్ లాగింగ్ ఇన్ టు ప్రొడక్షన్ అకౌంట్. దాంట్లోకి లాగిన్ అవ్వకుండానే టెస్టింగ్ ఎన్విరాన్మెంట్ లో ఫస్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేసుకుంటారు. ఒక శాంపుల్ ఇన్స్టెన్స్ క్రియేట్ చేసి మీరు అనుకున్న ఫంక్షనాలిటీ వచ్చిందా లేదా అని వెరిఫై చేస్తారు. Once the functionality is coming up from there, and then we can basically go ahead and reuse that machine image. So either from a different account, different region, so whatever your requirement is, you can basically go ahead and reuse it at that point of time, right? So that is the flexibility which we do have, right? So AMS కాకుండా ఇంకొకటి ఉంటాయి templates అని. So I want to discuss that also, then I will discuss more features. ఇక్కడ launch templates అని ఒక ఆప్షన్ ఉంటుంది. సో ఈ రెండింటికి డిఫరెన్స్ తెలియాలి, లాంచ్ టెంప్లెట్స్ కి మెషిన్ ఇమేజెస్ కి. ఈవెన్ ద లాంచ్ టెంప్లెట్స్ విల్ క్యారీ ద కాన్ఫిగరేషన్స్. సో హియర్ అండ్ హియర్ యూ కెన్ ఆల్సో get all these flexible features, right? అక్కడ కూడా ఉంటుంది, but depending on the need, so you will try to go ahead and come up with either launch templates or machine images, right? So once I discuss with the templates, so I need to concentrate on few more features with respect to machine image, so that I will be doing it, right? So we'll have a quick overview. Similarly, so whatever we have seen, ఎలా క్రియేట్ చేయాలి, ఎలా షేర్ చేయాలి, ఈ డిఫాల్ట్ ఫీచర్స్ అన్ని చూసిన తర్వాత నేను ఆ రెండింటికి కంపారిజన్ ఇస్తాను. సో బికాస్ దట్స్ వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్. టెంప్లెట్స్ ఎప్పుడు వాడాలి అండ్ machine images ఎప్పుడు వాడాలి, so aren't both of them the same thing? So even templates carry the configuration, right? So I need to discuss on that particular section as well, and after that I'll give an more advantages that we have with respect to using the machine image. నేను ఒక sample use case discuss చేశాను కదా, the same use case I will try to go ahead and implement and show you, right? So that you will get more understanding, right? So నేను అది జస్ట్ ఏం చేస్తానంటే ఒక EC2 ఇన్స్టెన్స్ లో ఏదైనా ప్యాకేజెస్ ఆర్ సాఫ్ట్వేర్ ఇన్స్టాల్ చేస్తాను. సో దాన్ని యూస్ చేసుకొని నేను మళ్ళీ న్యూ ఇన్స్టెన్సెస్ లాంచ్ చేస్తాను. సో ఆ న్యూ సర్వర్స్ లో అది ఇంపాక్ట్ అయిందా లేదా, రైట్? సో అది మనకు వస్తే ఓకే, మెషిన్ ఇమేజ్ ఏదైతే ఫంక్షనాలిటీ ఉందో అది సక్సెస్ఫుల్ గా ఎగ్జిక్యూట్ అయినట్టు. సో ఇఫ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ నాట్ కమింగ్ అప్, దెర్ ఇస్ సంథింగ్ ఐ హ్యావ్ మిస్డ్ వైల్ ఐఎమ్ లాంచింగ్ ద మెషిన్ ఇమేజ్, right? So if I implement in a use case, right, so you will understand it much better, so rather than showing from here. But generally this is the procedure if you want to go ahead and create a customized machine image, and this is the section where you can see, and this is the procedure how we launch an EC2 instance, and how we can go ahead and basically copy from one region to another, and if you want to make it public, if you want to make it private. So these are the different actions which will be involved, right? So tomorrow I'll try to go ahead and hope once I do that you will get more understanding or more clarity on when to use the machine images, right? So yes, here more of AWS, they will ask you questions like this. So what kind of requirements you can use this machine image? So elanti requirements ki meer machine images ni prefer chestaru. So alanti questions kuda trigger avutayi. So manam enti ante, so whenever we are learning, you should know the use case, right? Ante a kind of requirements ki idi apply cheyochu anedi, right? So that I will discuss tomorrow, both with respect to templates and as well as machine images, right? So that I'll be sharing this existing details over the group, and then I'll share the recording as well, right? I'll just share these documents as well from my end, right? So thanks everyone. I just have an small quick meeting at 10:30. So if you're having any other concerns or something, so please post me in the group, or you can come up in the tomorrow session, right? Thanks everyone.